Ask anyone to name the most powerful steam locomotive, and you'll likely hear two names. The first is the legend, the Union Pacific Big Boy, a true giant of the rails, capable of producing a massive 135,000 pounds of tractive effort. It's the most famous steam engine ever built, a household name even for people who aren't rail fans. Others might point to the Chesapeake and Ohio Allegheny, a monstrous machine built by Lima, known for its incredible horsepower, cranking out around 7,500 horsepower at the drawbar. These locomotives are celebrated, preserved in museums, and one big boy even runs today, thrilling crowds wherever it goes. They are the titans we remember. But here's the question almost nobody asks. What if there was a locomotive that outpulled both of them, a steam giant that was arguably more powerful? And yet it completely vanished from history? Meet the forgotten champion of steam, the Norfolk and Western Y6b. According to Norfolk and Western's own meticulously recorded test data, after the final round of modifications at their Roanoke shops, a Y6b could generate up to 170,000 pounds of starting tractive effort. That's not a typo, 170,000 pounds. That's significantly more than the Big Boy, more than the Allegheny. By this metric, it was the undisputed king of raw, low-speed pulling power. And yet today, every single Y6b ever built is gone, scrapped, extinct. Not a single one survives, no museum piece. No static display, nothing. How could the most powerful engine of its kind just disappear? The answer is a tragedy that boils down to just $50,000. The very last Y6b, locomotive number 2174, sat rusting in a Roanoke scrapyard for over a decade after its retirement. Railfans knew exactly what it was. They understood its significance, its power, its place in history. They desperately tried to save it. But this was the mid-1970s. There was no internet, no GoFund, no viral social media campaigns to spread the word. Raising that kind of money was a monumental task. Then in 1975, the scrapyard was sold to a British company that wanted the entire yard cleared out, and they wanted it done fast. The clock was ticking. In February 1976, with the funds not yet raised, the cutting torches were lit. One of the most powerful steam locomotives ever constructed in America was systematically cut into pieces, all because nobody could come up with $50,000 in time. So what made the Y6b so special, besides its incredible strength? The answer lies in where it was born. The Y6b wasn't built by one of the big commercial builders like Baldwin, Lima, or ALCO. It was built by the Norfolk and Western Railway itself. Their legendary Roanoke shops were a marvel of industrial self-sufficiency. They designed, engineered, and constructed their own locomotives entirely in-house. For decades, Roanoke produced hundreds of world-class steam engines exclusively for N&W's own use. This level of in-house locomotive manufacturing was almost unheard of in American railroading, giving N&W complete control over their machines. The Y6b was also the pinnacle of a technology that most other railroads had abandoned. It was a true compound mallet. In the 1940s, most giant articulated locomotives, like the Big Boy, used simple expansion. High-pressure steam was fed into all four cylinders, did its work once, and then blasted out the smokestack. This was incredibly powerful, but it was also incredibly thirsty for coal and water. The Y6b was smarter. As a compound engine, it used its steam twice. Steam first entered to smaller, high-pressure cylinders at the rear of the locomotive. After pushing those pistons, the now expanded, lower-pressure steam was piped to the front, where it entered to enormous low-pressure cylinders to do a second round of work before finally being exhausted. This made it vastly more efficient. Most railroads gave up on compounds decades earlier, thinking they were too complex and slow. Norfolk and Western didn't care, they perfected it. By 1952, the Y6b had evolved into the ultimate flexible workhorse, getting the best of both worlds. It could run in its super efficient compound mode for normal operations. But when a truly massive effort was needed, Like starting a heavy coal train on a steep grade, the engineer could flip a switch called the intercepting valve. Instantly, the locomotive switched to simple expansion mode. High-pressure live steam at 300 psi was diverted to all four cylinders simultaneously. The result, a mind-boggling 170,000 pounds of tractive effort slamming into the rails. The power was so extreme, so immense, that Roanoke engineers had to physically add 28,000 pounds of lead ballast to the front engine frame. They did this for one reason: to add enough weight to keep the wheels from slipping. The locomotive was literally too strong for its own good. Once the train was rolling, the engineer would switch back to compound mode, saving fuel and water on the long haul. And the tonnage these things moved was simply insane. After World War II, Norfolk and Western rated a single Y-class Mallet to haul a 14,500-ton coal train unassisted. This wasn't a one-time stunt for the cameras. This was their daily, normal operation. One locomotive, weighing about 600,000 pounds itself, pulling a train of nearly 15,000 tons of coal from the Appalachian mines all the way to the shipping docks at Norfolk. To feed its hunger, its tender carried 30 tons of coal and a staggering 22,000 gallons of water. The big boy was designed for speed, hustling freight over the relatively flat grades of Sherman Hill. But when it came to pure, brute force, low-speed pulling muscle, the Y6b stood at the absolute apex of American steam power. So if it was so good, why was it forgotten? Part of the reason is that Norfolk and Western was one of the very last major American railroads to abandon steam power, holding out until 1960. It made perfect sense for them. They were a coal-hauling railroad. Their primary fuel source was right there, in the cars behind the engine. Their investment in steam was deep, and their modern engines were incredibly efficient. In 1952, N&W conducted a famous head-to-head test. One of their Y6b locomotives, number 2197, versus for brand new EMDF7 diesel locomotives. According to the railroad's own data, the fuel and operating costs were nearly equal. And critically, the steam locomotives were already paid for. So N&W delayed the switch to diesel for as long as they could, but the end was inevitable. Across the country, suppliers of steam locomotive parts were closing down. The specialized labor needed to maintain them was retiring. And diesels, for all their faults, required far less daily maintenance and turning facilities. By the late 1950s, the writing was on the wall, and the mighty Y6bs were sent to the scrapyard. One locomotive almost escaped the torch. Number 2174, the same engine that would later sit in that scrapyard, was chosen to pull the railroad's famous farewell to steam excursion in July 1959. It was a celebrity for a day, then it was sent to the deadline to wait for its fate. Think about it, today, 8 big boys are preserved. 2 Allegheny survive in museums. But the one locomotive that arguably outpulled them both, not a single one was saved. The Norfolk and Western proudly called the Y6b the workhorse of the railroad. The steam giant that dominated Big Boy is gone forever, a ghost of steam, all because nobody could raise $50,000 in time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this look into a forgotten piece of railroad history, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the golden age of steam. See you next time.